Moments ago, Attorney General Pam Bondi directed federal prosecutors to launch a grand jury investigation into the origins of the Russia probe. Specifically, the investigation will look into criminal referrals from Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, who made unsubstantiated allegations that President Obama and his aides in the intelligence community began the Russia probe to ruin Trump's chances of becoming president. Now, folks, there is no evidence that ever happened. Zippo, nada, none. In fact, the idea that the Obama administration conspired against Trump was contradicted by a Senate Intelligence Committee review overseen by none other than Marco Rubio, who was the committee chairman at the time. Joining us now, Brendan Ballou, a former federal prosecutor with the Justice Department's National Security Division, and our friend Angelo Corazon, the president and CEO of Media Matters for America.
So, Brendan, how many times during your time at DOJ were you asked to secure a grand jury investigation and indictment where it was not clear who was being charged, what the charges were, or the timeline you were operating on?
0 times. So this announcement, as you said nothing about who's being investigated, what they're being investigated for, what the charging instrument would be, what the charges would be. The thing, though, that surprised me the most, or that was most interesting to me about what wasn't announced, was who was actually going to do the investigation. They just said that it was going to be an attorney in the Department of Justice.
An unnamed federal prosecutor.
Exactly, which suggests to me that they have not yet found a credible U.S. attorney to take this on.
Why do you say that?
Well, you know, one thing that I always say when I come on here is that the Department of Justice depends entirely on its credibility. You know, there are some hack U.S. attorneys that have gotten nominated and confirmed, unfortunately, that would be more than happy to take on an investigation like this. But if you actually want to secure an indictment in front of a grand jury, you know, 18 or more citizens, you need somebody that actually is going to be credible in front of them. And that they didn't announce this suggests that they haven't found that person yet.
Auditions are ongoing.
I just think this is crazy because it's just a distraction. It is a huge distraction, and it just goes to show that they're spiraling. But this is the Russia probe is another conspiracy theory that Obama and all of these folks within the Obama administration trumped up these charges and these claims against Donald Trump because they didn't want him to win, and that they were that they wiretapped his phone right during these are all conspiracy theories.
Wasn't there evidence that the Russians did try to meddle in our election?
You know, yes, but it's another conspiracy theory, and I think because Donald Trump is saying, I mean, I don't know. You tell me if the radio people have picked this one up, but he's seen what the Epstein, controversy around that conspiracy theory has done to him. It has not helped him. His wobbliness, because it's like, well, why don't you want to distance yourself from all the pedophilia, is not giving us more answers. It's providing more questions. On this, maybe his administration feels like, well, the people are with me on the Russia probe. I'm on the up and up on that conspiracy theory. So let me just mix that thing up on the table, and perhaps that'll distract people to look over here and not over at this thing.
Yeah, it's the safest possible thing that he could tap into as it relates to these conspiracies and these narratives. And it's also one of the promises that they've been making. And when I heard this, I thought all the way back to November of 2017, because I remember a Rush Limbaugh segment where he basically laid out a story that sounded exactly like what was reported today, a fantasy, a fiction, in which the Trump's Department of Justice literally just has a non-named U.S. attorney launch an investigation to get James Clapper and John Brennan for Russiagate. I mean, it's literally, they plucked this from a Rush Limbaugh segment. And it wasn't just then, and this gets to your point about it being safe. But that one, he was such a potent storyteller that those things have legs. And when he sort of laid that architecture out back then, and obviously it existed, around it, but he told it in such a concise way. If you then pull the thread, from that time period on, just a couple years, maybe a year and a half or so, 18 months, Fox News did 2,000 segments alone on that very topic, a notion of this investigation being launched by the Department of Justice that would then expose and prosecute these people. So to your point about it being safe, it is the safest possible play. And the two other corollaries to it are, one, this is part of his campaign promise. He launched in Waco, promising to be revenge. This was one of the revenge items, that he would go after these individuals and prosecute them. And the other is that, I think I'm so happy you started with the frame, that it's about his base. because it's not about the rest of MAGA media or Trump-aligned media. They don't care. See, they have not been percolating and swimming in this Russiagate stuff for the past 8 years. Trump's base has.
I'm sorry, what are we then defining as his base here?
I would say it's the people who were listening to talk radio 8 years ago and had cable that have now finally got Roku but don't know that it's Roku and still think that they are flipping the channels on a cable box and are now, for the first time ever, maybe listening to YouTube or watching YouTube because Tucker Carlson is no longer on Fox, right? That's his base. His base is the talk radio listener or the Fox News viewer and the people around it, the ones that have been percolating in QAnon and this. It's not the Joe Rogan audiences or the Theo Von audiences or the broadcasts. They were in it for the conspiracies against the abstract deep state, but they never cared about Russiagate. In fact, they love Obama. So this doesn't actually do anything for them. And I think that's the last thing I'll say is that it's a little landmine there because it's going to make some of those people really mad. They love Obama. They're going to think, what is this guy doing? I don't know anything about Russiagate. This feels like a distraction to stop us talking about your pedophilia defense.
Well, I'm going to stick with that for a little bit because you do open up a little bit of the other side of this in terms of how this is being fed by the administration in the first instance to that base. It's not, and this, we sort of touched on this last week, that you got to be careful about who the players are here. The Joe Rogan types, the folks who are the influencers, the ones who are kind of playing in this space at that level are not the base. They're not the rank and file moms and dads out there who put the MAGA hat on. In fact, the people burning MAGA hats probably, that's a whole nother conversation. But it does beg the question of what does this grand jury process do that either legitimizes or delegitimizes the story.
The thing is, I was thinking, you're talking about all these conspiracy theories. It seems like the worst thing that could happen here is actually that they bring an indictment that gets to a verdict. If you're basing a case entirely on conspiracy theories and then you bring it to the public, eventually that's going to have to get judged by a judge and by a jury.